Now, obviously, there's going to be no like viewers and whatever else. Whoop, here we go. So, let me just adjust that. Oh, that's perfect. Okay. So I want this to be like an actual, like, I don't know, I suppose use of a different way of taking stuff in case there's anything I forget during certain times when I'm actually teaching this stuff. But anyway, man, my face looks like so red. Anyway, whatever. So as you can see, this happens to be, right here, HQ. And basically, for this first bit that I'm going to like upload later on anyway, I'm going to talk about the theory of natural selection, like just like kind of a brief like intro to it, I suppose. Yeah, because I mean, again, like I said, it's just be a different way of doing it. See, we're all casual and whatever else. But yeah, so basically, anyway, what we're going to look at in this particular part of the topic is evolution by natural selection. Whatever you think of it, whatever you know about it, well, hopefully you'll learn something more about it. But yeah, oh, hang on. See, I've got like the actual whiteboard and everything here. There we go. I kind of want it to be quick sort of clips, so it's not taking forever, so it's not like a whole, too long didn't read sort of thing, except too long didn't watch. So basically, here we go, get the whiteboard and the shot. I really hope that isn't like inverted and whatever else. There you go, look at that. So there's a whole bunch of information. I'll just hold that there for a little bit now so you can potentially pause that. I mean, I'm sure I'll get better at doing this, or especially if I've got more room and everything else. But basically, so natural selection kind of ties in with the theory that survival of the fittest that Charles Darwin, British nationalist, came up with many years ago. And basically, what that theory was that there's variation in species. So different animals, as in like literally like one different animal to another different animal in the same species, will have slight variation. And in that, certain characteristics are more likely to allow organisms to survive. And so this happens to be across like everything. It's like obviously in people, it's in animals, it's in plants, it's in whatever, right? And so like one prime example of that anyone can see literally every day. I mean, there's heaps of examples. I mean, I don't necessarily know how these particular examples might necessarily mean that a certain organism is more likely to survive, but you can at least see the variation. It highlights variation, I suppose, because like in people, like we'll have different eye color, we'll have different hair color. There's people that are tall, that are short, all those generic kind of things. And so that's an example of variation. I suppose we kind of look at it more so in terms of animals, and I mean, I suppose even to a lesser extent plants, because obviously it can be exhibited in plants too, but in animals because they are more likely there's likely to be swings in terms of characteristics displayed in the population over shorter periods of time, I want to say, compared to like people. So, like for example, there's these moths like ages ago. Like we're talking Industrial Revolution when they started, burning coal and all of that sort of stuff in England, and these two moths, literally the same species, but one was like one literally like their pigment color was black and the other one was white, and the trees in that particular area were all white, and so it meant that the white ones were camouflaged, and therefore they were more likely to survive, and the ones that were black were not camouflaged and were less likely to survive. Anyway, once they started, all this soot started pumping out of these factories, and then it would literally like coat these trees. So then these trees were essentially becoming black by being coated with this soot. And so then it meant, okay, the black moths were more likely to now survive because they were camouflaged, whereas the white ones stood out, and so they were more likely to get eaten by predators. And so then you had a bit of a swing in that population. So then, okay, now you were more likely to see black ones as opposed to white ones. And then it's not to say that all the white ones were gone completely. It's just there were far less. So there was a swing in that population because those ones that were more suited to survive in that particular environment, because of a characteristic that they had that varied from, another version of that animal in that same species. And so they were more likely to have, offspring, children, however you want to refer to it, pass it on, and then you would see more that were that way. And I mean, obviously, if it continued like that for a long period of time, then eventually you probably wouldn't have seen any, like the white ones would have become extinct, and then, so they would have evolved in that direction. So that's what that is, and that's why there's different genes. Well, it's not the only reason why, obviously, but that variation, means that that particular species is more likely to survive. Because, say, if the entire species had been white and there wasn't a single other color of them, black or otherwise, then it may very well have led to the extinction of that entire species because there was no variation in the population. And so, because there was no variation in this scenario, then again, that entire species would have been extinct. So I suppose it's nature's way of saying, okay, well, if there's varied characteristics in an entire population of species, us included, people, then we're more likely to survive. And so it's a gradual thing. It takes a long period of time. It's not going to happen overnight. Like a species isn't going to evolve, overnight. So hopefully that makes some sort of sense. Now, one thing else that I want to kind of touch on is, so that's the main accepted theory of evolution that we have. I mean, there's other ones that are out there, but that's the main sort of one, because there was one that kind of came before it, which wasn't really accepted because it didn't really make sense, I suppose. And it was actually released by... And that particular theory is that acquired characteristics. So basically, if you have a particular animal and it somehow acquires a particular characteristic, then it's like it's going to change its genetic makeup and then pass that on to its offspring, which makes no sense. It would be basically like saying, okay, if I wanted to acquire, if I wanted to start having my future offspring having 4 fingers instead of 5, then I'd literally cut one off on each hand and then pass that on, and then have children myself, and then that would mean that they would have 4 fingers, which, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense. And the main example that Lamarck actually used was giraffes. Like that, you had ones that had slightly, they had a certain length of neck, and then some of them would literally stretch their necks to reach the top leaves, and then therefore now they would have acquired a longer neck, and then by acquiring a longer neck, it would mean that their offspring would then all have longer necks, which doesn't really make sense because that's not how genes and genetics work. So yeah, because you have a certain amount of genes, so genotype is the word that's used commonly in biology, which means that's what the actual gene is. So if you have the gene for brown hair, then it's going to be in your genetic makeup, and then therefore it shows it as a phenotype, which is the actual observable thing. So the genotype is the actual gene itself that's in your DNA, and then the phenotype is kind of the way that we refer to it as saying, okay, you have the gene for brown hair, therefore your hair is actually going to be brown and it's going to be observable, like other people can see that you have brown hair and that sort of thing. So I suppose I'm going to kind of cut it short there because I don't want to overload certain things. But just as kind of a test sort of video, I'm going to do way more of these because I want to see if I can get some sort of engagement, not necessarily huge or anything else, but I mean, if it helps anyone, especially students that I have to teach and whatever else, learn that's about this sort of stuff in a different way that, maybe they missed in certain other times that they've heard about this sort of stuff or whatever, then yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But, thanks for watching and listening, and hopefully you've learned something about evolution today.